how's it going? Oh, I am so glad this worked. So, if you couldn't tell by this video, this is going to be my last video of the year. So today I will be sharing all the books that I have read in 2023 along with my reviews in them. I've been seeing this trend a lot on YouTube and I thought, okay, you know what? Why not jump in on it? I mean, I love to read. So my goal this year was to read, I think it was like 20 books, but I ended up surpassing my goal and I read, as of last night, it was 24. So I exceeded my goal by 4 books. And hopefully in 2024, I can beat that goal. Maybe I should shoot for 25. I don't know. Also, I'm really excited to share that I got a mic. So, but yeah, without further ado, here are all the books that I have read in 2023. I think the first book that I finished this year was I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy. It was actually recommended by the book club that I'm in to read this book, and I was just so shocked by so many of the things that she wrote, but also I have to commend her. The biggest surprise for me with this book was that she never wanted to be a child star. Now it makes sense as to why, like, we don't see her acting anymore. And I understand, like, the title of this book was really controversial. Well, after you read this book, I think you will understand where she's coming from. Another thing I really admired about Jeanette's writing is that she manages to balance humor while also not shying too far away from her trauma. In my opinion, I don't think there's anything funny about sharing trauma, but sometimes you are in a reflecting period where it's like, wow, that happened. That's not to say we're all gonna laugh at our trauma. You may not be understanding of like why she incorporates humor in this book, but if you read books by comedians who had rough upbringings, like you would start to notice a pattern where they would use humor to not make light of trauma altogether, but to just make it like easier to live with, I guess. It's not easy to share stories about relationships where you had a falling out with a parent or you had an abusive parent. And yeah, I really commend Jeanette for that. And I loved how honest she was in this. And just reading this, all I can think of is, yeah, good for her. You know, that meme, good for her, good for her. Yeah, I think I will give this rating maybe 5 out of 5. The next book I read was Unmarriageable by Soniah Kamal. And basically it is Pride and Prejudice, but if it took place in Pakistan in the early 2000s. This was also recommended by the book club that I'm in, and I am so glad I read this book. I even listened to the audio as well, and it really brought the story to life. The only qualm I have about this book is that like it is too true to the original source. So like you'll definitely see that with the character names. Like Mr. Darcy is Darcy, Elizabeth is Elispa, I think. But other than that, I definitely enjoyed the story, and I did get some laughs out of it. 4.5 stars out of 5. The next book is actually a favorite of mine. This is Love from A to Z by S.K. Ali, and I am so glad that I read it this year. I wanted to read this sooner, but it's okay. Also, a funny story. I remember when I picked this book up from the library that when I saw the cover for the first time, I was really shocked to see TikToker Joe Ando. I love his videos and I was just so surprised. I'm like, wait a minute. So this man right here, he acts, he designs clothes, and he's a cover model for books. Love to see it. What I loved about this story overall was how the two main characters, they shared in common marvels and oddities, and basically like marvels and oddities, to put it this way, is like positives and negatives, if you will. And I thought it was so cute that they shared that commonality. There's also traveling involved, where the main character goes to Qatar, where the story takes place, and she does meet her, spoiler alert, future husband on a flight to Qatar, and they end up meeting at an event at the same place at the same time. I also liked how honest it was with Islamophobia, especially when you are in the academic setting, and also the privilege there is that Muslim women, they have it harder when it comes to Islamophobia than men do. But yeah, I was so engaged with the story, and final rating, I'm gonna say 4.5 out of 5. Next book on my list, this one is actually a manga, and I don't typically read manga, but my friend put me on, and yeah, I finished this pretty fast. So there was an anime that came out in the 2000s called Nana. Basically, it's about two girls from Japan who are both named Nana, and they move to Tokyo, and they go through the ups and downs of being in your 20s and relationships and yeah, everything that comes with that. Me being a first-time manga reader is not realizing that you're supposed to read the manga from right to left, sort of. But it was nice to have that guide on the back of the book. That made things easier for me. I will say though, I think I like the series a little bit better. I don't know. I haven't read the second volume of Nana, so I think it's too soon for me to tell. But personally, I think I'm gonna give this a 4 out of 5. So the next book I have on my list is Secrets of Divine Love by Helwa. Or Helwa, I don't know. I'm sorry if I'm butchering that. So I know this one is gonna be a little controversial. I loved how the author really dived into philosophical questions that we as Muslims don't even think to ask. And this book really helped me understand what Allah's love really means. I don't know if I would recommend this to someone who is new to Islam. I don't know. The one thing I will say that was hard for me to follow with this book was how repetitive it was when it came to the subject of love. I was hoping to learn a little bit more about how we can find love as Muslims internally and not just through a relationship with God. Other than that, her writing, whoever she is, so powerful, mashallah. I'm gonna give it a 4.5 out of 5. Next book on my list. I own it, but I have to get up and get it, but I don't want to get up and get it because I'm so comfortable. I mean, first world problems. So I had a little bit of a technical difficulty. So I don't know if my phone decided to be rude and just stop recording, or the other possible verdict was I may have accidentally sat on my remote, but that's okay. That is not going to happen again. Anyway, so that was a sign for me to get up and get the books, which I have 2 of them right here. Yep, so these are, I'm going to do both of these at the same time, actually. With the Heart and Mind by Mikaeel Ahmed Smith, and When Hearing Becomes Listening, also by Mikaeel Ahmed Smith. I actually got to meet this author, and he went to my mosque to give a speech and sell his book and to sign autographs. So a little 2-in-1 review of both of these books. They're sort of on the same theme of how listening connects to spirituality and why in Islam it's so important to be a good listener. You think listening is just in one ear out the other. There's actually a deeper aspect as to what good listening is, and it can actually date back to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, which was actually really fascinating to learn. I will say though, the information was sort of overwhelming for me. I mean, that's not to say that the author does not have credibility. It shows, right? He's clearly done his research. However, with his writing style, I couldn't understand most of the things that I was reading. Sometimes I would read one of the passages from one of these books and it's okay, can you explain it to me I'm 5 because I'm not understanding any of this. Right. I feel you have to be college age to understand this, or you have to have a little bit of background in psychology while also understanding the history of Islam. That's not me. Personally, I don't think it needs to be 2 books. I don't know. I feel this can all be covered in one lecture. So yeah, if you're sort of in the beginner level like me, I guess maybe, I don't know, if this was just one lecture, then you might understand it better. But I guess if you wanted to go deeper, then I recommend reading these books. So final rating for both of them, 3.5 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read this year was Somebody's Daughter by Ashley C. Ford. And I think this is one of my favorite memoirs that I read this year. So this book chronicles the author's upbringing in a single-parent household, and her father is not in the picture because he got sent to jail. So as I was reading this book, I can see where she was going with trying to navigate her way in the world and just understanding race, even as a little Black girl, but also how, with her dad's absence in her life, how that negatively impacted her and how things could have gone differently, and how the American prison complex can negatively affect families. I really appreciated Ashley's honesty in this memoir. I would recommend it if you are looking to read more memoirs related to race. Final rating, 5 out of 5. And segueing onto race, the next book I will share is Between the World and Me by Ta-Nehisi Coates. So to my surprise, this was actually a short read. I think it was like under 200 pages, and I got it done within a couple days. So this book is a long letter to the author's son about growing up a Black man in America. The way that I saw this book, it was like, it's like how Black parents give the talk to their kids, but this one is like more in depth. I did like his writing style. I will say though, like some of the information was a little overwhelming to me, and it got me thinking like, okay, I don't understand like how this is a letter to your son if you're not talking to him like he's your kid. But then again, he is talking to his son in a serious matter like an adult, so I will give him that. Final rating, 4.5 out of 5. So the next book I have is The Productive Muslim by Mohammed Faris. So this is a self-help guide for Muslims who are looking to be more productive but also want to connect more with their deen. There was also tips in here about how to be productive during Ramadan, which I actually needed, because when you fast, girl, you are so tired and like you lose brain cells and you don't think straight. I loved how there was also proof that getting up for Fajr can also increase productivity. So if you are looking to improve your deen and take back your time in 2024, I recommend this. Final rating, 5 out of 5. The next book I read is A Place for Us by Fatima Farheen Mirza, I think. So it tells the story of a family, an Indian family, I believe, based in California. It's 2 daughters and the youngest son, and it chronicles the upbringing of that family from, I think, elementary school to adulthood. So there's a scandal that happens with the son that could potentially break the family apart. I listened to the audiobook of this, and when we got to the final part, I believe, I don't know, there was a sudden switch up where, this is a spoiler alert, by the way, but so it went from, I think it was like third person perspective into the dad narrating how he's feeling about losing his son. And it was just not something I was expecting, but also like, I don't understand the relevancy behind that. I did put a review up on Goodreads, so I'll just like show it here. I will say though, I really like the author's writing style, and not bad for a debut novel. I think I rated this like 3 stars out of 5 on Goodreads, if I'm not mistaken. I'm gonna say 3.5 out of 5. Moving on. So the next book that I read was The Joy Luck Club by Amy Tan. I actually got to see the movie as well, but I really liked Amy Tan's writing style, and like I'm saying that about every book now, but like with this book, right? Each chapter is told from the perspective of a different character, be it one of the daughters or one of the mothers. And one of the overarching themes of this book is how mother-daughter relationships are so crucial, especially if you are the daughter of immigrants. Of course, like I don't understand the culture entirely because I'm not Chinese, obviously, but you know, being the daughter of immigrants, like you learn to tap into your culture and you learn some shocking things about your family the older that you get, but like it just, instead of being disappointed, like it just clicks. It's like, oh, right? Because that's how I felt when I was growing up, right? That's how I felt when I reached adulthood, right? So basically what I'm trying to say is this book definitely captured the experience of being a child of immigrants. And I don't know how it feels from the mother's perspective, because I don't know. I'm not a mom. I'm not an immigrant mother. Yeah, I'm going to give it 4.5 out of 5. The next book is The Arsonist City by Hala Alyan, I think. So this was one of the books I actually didn't like this year. We did read it in my book club, and we were just like, what are we reading? I really wanted to like this book, but like the characters were just so insufferable and they were just so privileged. And I mean, this is a story about a rich Arab family living in America But yeah, there were some moments in that book that like I wish I did not read, and it's just like, why does the author have to go there? Like, was this really necessary? So yeah, I didn't understand the positive reviews that came out of this book. I don't know. It felt like, I hate using this word, erotica. Like, this book was just so scandalous. I couldn't take it. So I unfortunately had to finish this because we were going to discuss this in my book club. Yeah. And our discussion was pretty interesting. I don't remember what I rated this on Goodreads. I think it was like 2 or 3 stars. I'm going to give it 2.5. What? Because I do like the author's choice of perspective, and I did like her writing style, but like, it's just, the content was just too much for me. So after finishing that book, I decided to grab something funny, and the next book is Yinka, Where is Your Huzband? This is by Lizzie Damilola Blackburn. This book is a romantic comedy that takes place in modern-day London, and the main character is a Nigerian British woman who is named Yinka, just like in the title. So it starts off at Yinka's sister's bridal shower, and basically her mom and the aunties, they all make an announcement, and they're like, let's all pray together, and let's pray that Yinka gets a husband soon. So basically the entire story is, okay, so I think I want to get a husband, but like, I don't know how to navigate this without compromising my faith and my culture, because she is a Christian woman. And I loved how she didn't compromise the fact that she was a career woman, and also it didn't shy away from how dark-skinned women have it hard when it comes to relationships, because there is some colorism, like internalized and externalized. And should I spoil the ending? Should I not? Yeah, so I'm gonna spoil it, but if you don't want to hear this, like, cover your ears until it's over. But yeah, I actually really liked the ending, you know? I liked that it didn't end with her getting married, because that would have been cliche. So, end of spoiler. I will say though, I wish like we had learned a little bit more about Yinka's personality. I don't know, it was kind of lacking a little bit. But yeah, final rating, 4.5 out of 5. So the next book I read this year, actually, this was my second time reading it cover to cover, and wow, this book hit different the second time I read it. It was Born a Crime by Trevor Noah. I actually have a copy of this, but I don't want to get up and get it. I am too comfortable today. This is a memoir about Trevor Noah's upbringing in South Africa. In case y'all didn't know, Trevor is half black, half white. And at the time he was born, it was actually illegal for black people and for white people to intermingle and to have children together. What I loved about this book, it doesn't even feel like it's Trevor's memoir. It feels more like a big thank you letter to his mother, which I thought was really sweet. And you can tell like he really means it when he says that like he would be nothing without black women. And that's one of the reasons why like I respect Trevor Noah. But I also liked how honest he was about South Africa's politics and how apartheid came to be and like how that the history of that is relevant to his upbringing. Even though when you're a kid, you don't even think about the history of the world around you, right? You're just a kid. You don't think about race. An instance of that was whenever he was supposed to hide from the local authorities, like when his mom would tell him, hey, Trevor, you need to go inside. And he took this as playing hide and seek, which I thought that was adorable. But yeah, it's like one of those things that like you overlook as a kid, not realizing until you're older, and you're like, whoa, wait a minute, that had something to do with something greater. I love this book, and just reading it the second time around, like, yeah, it made me love it even more. Final rating, 5 out of 5. So the next book that I read this year is Temple Folk by Aaliyah Bilal, and it is a collection of short stories. They're all fictional, and they are told in different time periods, I believe from, I want to say, the Black Panthers movement to modern day. Yep, so it is a short story anthology told from different time periods. I like that the stories were told in chronological order because, unpopular opinion, like, okay, call me basic, but I do like it when timelines are told in chronological order because it is confusing to jump back and forth between decades. Like, I need a linear timeline in what I read. The only thing is that I was having a little bit of trouble grasping the exposition, and the pacing was a little bit rushed, but other than that, like, I can understand where the story was heading. Yeah, leading up to the ending of these stories, like, I just wish, like, it didn't feel as abrupt as it did. I don't remember what I rated this on Goodreads, but I think I'm gonna give it maybe like a 3.75 out of 5. The next book that I read this year was River Spirit by Leila Aboulela, and it is a historical fiction novel. It takes place in Sudan, I think in the 1800s, if I'm not mistaken. And this is when colonization is happening, and the main character gets in the middle of this. It was a nice story. The thing is, it was a little hard for me to grasp. I don't know how else to explain this book. I'm just gonna cut to the chase. Final rating. I think on Goodreads, did I rate this 3.5 or 4? I don't know. I'm gonna say 3.5 out of 5. So the next book that I read was When We Were Sisters by Fatima Asghar. And if you are a Miss Marvel fan like me, little known fact, they actually directed an episode, if I'm not mistaken, or wrote the script. I'm not entirely sure. I'll paste the information here. But yeah, when I learned that they helped in the production of Miss Marvel, I'm like, wow, but this person is such a great writer. I loved their use of poetry in this and the ambiguity of some of the characters, including Uncle Redacted. Basically, the story is about 3 girls who live in an American city. I think it's in New York. I don't remember. And they become orphans. They lose their dad, and their uncle has to take care of them. And this is a coming of age story of these 3 sisters. This put me on an emotional roller coaster. Like, it was humorous in some parts. It was sad in some parts. It was relatable. And I liked how the author also shifted perspectives of characters for a reason, right? And you'll hear this when you read the audiobook, right? It's done correctly, right? It's not like something that's a complete surprise to you and you're wondering, like, wait a minute, what was the point of that? Like, how does that help with the writing? How does it help with the book? Final rating, 5 out of 5 stars. Ooh, okay, so this next one, it was so brutal to read. It is As Long as the Lemon Trees Grow by Zoulfa. I hope I'm saying her name right. I'm sorry if I'm not. So this book is a young adult historical fiction novel, and you would think that historical fiction is like, I don't know, like 50 years ago or something. This actually took place roughly 10 years ago, right? So this is like 2011, 2012-ish. And this is during the Syrian war, and this is told from the 19-year-old main character's perspective. I forgot her name. I'm blanking on it. Oh, Salama, that was her name. So yeah, 19-year-old Salama is a nurse in Homs, Syria. And yeah, the war is happening. People are getting shot left and right. There are dead bodies dropping. And for a YA novel, this was absolutely haunting. And I was not expecting it to be as gory as it was. I mean, it is war. Like, it's not, there's no filter when it comes to war. In war, like, yeah, there is no such thing as playing it safe. But yeah, so the main character works as a nurse, and she is plotting an escape from Syria so that she can have a better life. And then she meets this young man while she is saving, I think it was his sister's life, and they fall in love. And I was a little skeptical at first about the love story element. Throughout reading this, I'm like, wait a minute. So this gives some hope as to how the story is going to end. And I'm actually glad I kept going because, spoiler alert, is it really? I don't know. You be the judge. It does have a happy ending. But yeah, this book was so beautifully written, and like leading up towards that ending, like it was just, this book will tug at your heartstrings, you guys. I also read this around the time that the events of October 7th happened, so this hit even harder. If you really want to understand like how war affects civilians, then, I mean, of course, this is a work of fiction, but it is also sort of true to real life. I mean, the author did put a guide at the end of the book, I believe, then yeah, I recommend this book. 5 out of 5. Okay, so after crying myself to sleep from reading that book, I decided to pick up something funny. And one of my favorite comedians, Amber Ruffin, wrote a book with her sister, Lacey, and it's called You'll Never Believe What Happened to Lacey, Crazy Stories About Racism. And I thought in the beginning, I am gonna enjoy this. I am a Black woman who like grew up hearing like a ton of crazy stuff. And it's like, it reminded me of my relationship with my sisters and like how I tell them like my stories. And yeah, it's funny because like with Amber Ruffin, you know, she has a segment on Late Night with Seth Meyers where it's called Amber Says What. And like, I bet like, okay, her writing this book, I bet she had like the biggest Amber Says What moment. But yeah, like this book, oh my God, it was so painfully funny. I was punching the air. But I also admire how when Lacey shared her story, she wasn't afraid to get candid about the harder hitting stories, like when you're a Black woman in the workforce or when there's internalized racism in a place of worship. So yeah, I really appreciate Lacey's honesty, and Amber's humor just made this better. And it did feel like a conversation with two sisters, which I loved it. Final rating, 5 out of 5. So the next book I have it right here in my hands. The Defining Decade by Dr. Meg Jay. This was the self-help book that I didn't know I needed. So for those who don't know, the author of this book is actually a therapist, and I think she also is a college professor, if I'm not mistaken. She also has a TED Talk called 30 is Not the New 20. I'll link it down below. But yeah, I listened to the audiobook, and I think she had like a little bit of a Southern accent, which I thought was kind of cute. But yeah, so there are different sections in this book. One is about career, the other is about love, and the other is about like taking care of yourself. And I could apply myself to almost every single story in this book. Basically, she shares anecdotes of what happens in her clients. Of course, without breaching, you know, patient therapist confidentiality, I think that's what it's called. And like what we can learn from this and how we can apply it to our own lives, right? And yeah, the 20s is truly a defining decade, right? We put so much emphasis on our 20s, right? We're not kids anymore, but also like we're not like, I don't know, we're not old to the point where we have to walk around in canes or anything like that. Or like we already have to have like a house saved up. I mean, unless you're rich, I mean, yeah. I will say, if you don't like the traditional way of things, I don't think you will agree with the things that she has to say in this book. An example of that is with hookup culture. You know, she does mention how hookups can be detrimental to your mental health and they're not really beneficial. And yeah, some people might take offense to that. I don't, because I don't like hookup culture. I don't subscribe to that. Yeah, and she said that marriage can be optional, right? But with marriage, it can really be the biggest test of any relationship. It is common in the West for couples who are dating to live together, but they don't get married. And then there are stories where they do end up getting married after 10 years of living together, and then they divorce a year later, right? So there is no correlation that if we live X number of years together, then this might foolproof our marriage, right? No, it's entirely up to you. She says that you need to go about relationships the way that you feel is beneficial to both you and your partner. So yeah, call me a traditionalist. I do subscribe to the idea of getting into a relationship with the intention of getting marriage. Maybe that's just the Muslim in me, right? So yeah, I guess if you're Muslim, you're definitely gonna get a lot out of this book. But if you don't subscribe to the traditional ways of things, yeah, you might not like this book. I also really liked what she had to say about social media as well. I've been off social media since July of 2022. She was even sharing a story about how before she became a therapist, she was a camp counselor, I think. Or she worked on a cruise ship as a camp counselor. I'm not entirely sure. But basically, there was no internet on the ship. And the campers had to learn how to pick up hobbies and to communicate with each other without using the internet, and they loved it. I think in an age where maybe my generation, but also the younger generations are slowly becoming chronically online. I think learning to set boundaries is so crucial, which I'm glad that she highlighted that in this book. And yeah, she does recommend that. Yeah, I found myself agreeing to a lot of things in this book. And the good thing is this is my own personal copy, so I will be reading this again and I will be annotating it. I'm gonna give it a 4.5 out of 5. Next up, we have Better Not Bitter by Yusuf Salaam. And for those who don't know, he is one of the exonerated 5. So this is a memoir of the author who was wrongfully arrested for a crime that he didn't commit back in, I believe, the late 80s. So Yusuf Salaam actually happens to be Muslim. And, oh yeah, by the way, this is his picture in the back. And also, fun fact, I think he ran for city council in New York City and he won, which was absolutely triumphant, especially after reading this. But yeah, so for those who don't know, the author is actually a Muslim. And throughout this book, he shares how tapping into his deen actually helped him get through a really harsh prison sentence. He also found some solace in writing poetry as well. And he also dived into the shocking statistics that come with the American prison system. Like the amount of Black men who are wrongfully arrested is absolutely, it is absolutely chronic. So this book, like, it'll make you angry at the system, but at the end of this, he's just like, hey, it's fine. I survived out of this. Like, you know, if you're gonna channel your anger, you know, use it for the right reasons, right? The only issue I have with this book is, like I said, I can only understand in linear timelines, and this did jump from one year to the previous year and then fast forward to the next and then rewind a bit, and it was a little confusing for me, but other than that, please get this book. Final rating, 4.5 out of 5. So this next one I actually finished last night, and this is going to be my final book of the year, but it's not going to be my final book of the video because I saved the best for last, so stay tuned. So this is Rooms of Their Own, Where Great Writers Write by Alex Johnson, and I loved the illustrations in this book. This is one of those cozy coffee table books, but it ends up being a little bit better. So you actually learn from 50 different writers about how they assemble their writing spaces. And as a creative writer myself, like, it is crucial for me to have a specific space for me to write. I also learned some great tips in here and also some historical facts. So if you're a creative writer like me and you're looking for some inspiration to do some more creative writing while also changing up your space, I mean, hey, this is a work in progress. And also, like, I built this bookshelf. I don't know if you can. Yeah, I put this together. Yeah, if you're looking for some inspiration or you just want to, you know, do a deep dive into history about some of your favorite authors, yeah, I recommend this. My favorites were definitely Maya Angelou's and James Baldwin. I loved that they did a little traveling so that they can get their writing done. James Baldwin did his writing in Paris, and he got a lot more clarity out of writing there than in America, which, wow. And Maya Angelou, you know, she would go to different hotel rooms just so she could have her designated space to write. So basically, the moral of the story is, if you are suffering a creative writing block, travel. All right, last but not least, I am so excited to share this one for last. So the final book that I read in 2023 is The Woman in Me by Britney Spears. As soon as I learned the audiobook was on Spotify, I'm like, I have to get on this because I know people are going to be talking about this. So I am a millennial who grew up on pop queens and pop divas and pop culture. And growing up, I never really understood why Britney got so much hate. What's funny was I even predicted that, I don't know, one day she was going to come forward and she's going to share what's going on. And I am so happy that she did. I listened to the audiobook, which was narrated by Michelle Williams. What actually pushed me to read the book altogether was in my writers group, we were reading a ground piece, which was an excerpt from her book. And I was just so blown away. I'm like, wait a minute, Britney, this happened to you? Wow. And basically, like, in that excerpt, she was saying that, like, you know, she was getting away from the chaos of a breakup and just the paparazzi bugging her, and she took a road trip with her friend, and they just looked up at the stars and they were just thinking about life, and I'm like, wait a minute, wow, this is actually grounding me a bit. So yeah, I was just so moved, and as soon as I saw that book at the library, I ran, not literally, but you get what I mean. I ran to the checkout line. She was so brutally honest, and you guys, the tea was hot. She was not afraid to throw punches, and I admire that in her. We also finally got her perspective on when she was undergoing the conservatorship, because I've seen documentaries on her conservatorship, but it's like, okay, can we get her perspective, please? Because she's the victim here, right? She's the one who had been suffering for 13 years, and like, I wanted to know her side of the story. But yeah, you might think it's crazy that I am invested in what happened to this pop star. It is some real true crime, you guys. As happy as I am that she wrote this book, it's also really heartbreaking too, because she loved to perform, she loved what she did, but like, her family ruined it for her, and the media ruined it for her, and her ex-husband ruined it for her. I just want to give this woman a great big hug. Her and Jeanette McCurdy and all the other authors that wrote vulnerable memoirs. So yeah, I'm gonna give this rating a 4.5 out of 5. But yeah, those are all the books that I read this year, and I am looking forward to all the books that I'm going to be reading next year. So if you are interested, please let me know in the comments down below, and maybe I'll look into it next year. I thought I would try this. I don't know. I love reading books, and I don't know if I want to be a booktuber, but I don't know. Maybe this is something I can look into. But yeah, let me know what books you guys have read this year, and if you read some of the books that I mentioned, comment down below. Yeah, let's talk about it. Let's be our own little book club. But yeah, so the sun's going down and my family is home, and I am going to end this video here, which is perfect timing. All right, bye guys.